everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Felicia Campbell. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Florida. I currently operate a small group practice that works with BIPOC, LGBTQ, and immigrant and first gens. And we serve DC, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, and Florida. And today we will be talking about the architecture of belonging, an intersectional framework for working with Black immigrant women's mental health. I'm a share, although this is part of my work. This is also very personal to me. I am a daughter of immigrants from the island of Jamaica. And so this, again, is not just a professional topic, but this is also very deeply personal to me. So I wanted to first start with a little reflection exercise. And so I would like to invite everyone to take a moment to close your eyes and feel free to leave your cameras off or turn your cameras off if they're on. And I want you to imagine yourself moving anywhere in the world that you would like to be. This can be Costa Rica, this can be the coast of Spain, Mexico, anywhere in the world. Better quality of living, better food, better weather. You sell all your belongings, you bid everyone farewell, and you move to this dream place. And I want you to think about those first moments that you arrive and how excited and hopeful you are for this new life. Again, the weather maybe, better food. Just take a moment to embrace this new reality in this new place. Now, I want you to take a moment and you're going to skip ahead to week 18. So you've been in this new place for 18 weeks now, and reality starts to set in, and you're now looking around and you're starting to wonder, okay, I'm here. What does community look like at this point? Who's with you? Who do you have? Who's there when you're sick? Have you been able to cultivate community yet? Have you been able to navigate language barriers? Transportation? Have you gotten a vehicle? Are you still using public transportation? Are you still walking? Does it feel sustainable at that point? Finances. Have you been able to get a bank account set up in this new country? Are you working? Where are you working? How are the locals? What's their attitude towards expats and immigrants? Are you feeling homesick? Do you begin to question now as the rose-colored glasses, the new beginning, the adrenaline of it all? Are you now beginning to question, do you stick it out or do you leave? What if you can't leave at this point? And just take a moment to sit in this reality. And I invite you to open your eyes back to your current reality, being in the US, having your transportation, having your language, having all the things. And let's take a moment to consider that this is the reality for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks, this is their reality involuntarily. Okay. And we're going to explore this with one of the most misunderstood populations in our field, which is Black immigrant women and girls. When we think about and talk about immigration, we talk a lot about the Latin American community, but we also have immigrants from countries, Jamaica, Haiti, Nigeria, Trinidad and Tobago, and they also face a lot of unique challenges being at the intersection of race, gender, and immigration. Okay, just give me 1 second. Anastasia, I'm going to share my screen.
You should be able to know.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. Now, again, Black immigrant women sit at the intersection of immigration, racialization, and gendered expectations, yet they remain largely invisible within traditional mental health frameworks. So they have experienced trauma in their home countries, they've experienced trauma on their way to the US, and they've experienced trauma upon arrival. Some have risked everything, some have lost everything. They're in survival mode and they are ultimately simply trying to adapt, trying to figure out that bank account, trying to navigate these language barriers, trying to figure out transportation, trying to figure everything out. Yet, research doesn't always reflect them. The frameworks that we use don't always account for them. And when they do show up in our offices, we often pathologize what is actually adaptation, simply what is them trying to survive. Now, when we talk about the clinical gap, as clinicians, we're often trained with symptom-focused assessments, a lot of the assessments and tools that we use, diagnosis-driven treatment, especially for those of us who are in network with insurance. We have Eurocentric theoretical bases. A lot of the work that we do is in Western European standards. And this individual pathology lens where everything is on the individual, right? So their diagnoses, their symptoms, their functioning is an individual failure as opposed to looking at the systems that are shaping their experiences. So what's missing from the clinical work that we do is considerations for immigration stress and precarity, racial surveillance and weathering the chronic stress, intergenerational acculturation dynamics. So we'll take a look at parent-child dynamics and how they show up, and then structural and systemic context. So the person and environment, actually literally putting that into our work. So these are 4 pillars that go into this framework. So belonging is not just an outcome of good therapy, but a prerequisite for it. So the 4 pillars are psychological safety, cultural affirmation, relational trust and rapport, and then systemic awareness. And these pillars interact and they shape how safety, distress, and healing shows up in the room when we are working with our clients. Now, here are 3 clinical competencies. So we have differential assessment, intergenerational intervention, and cultural safety protocol. And we're going to take a look into each of these individually. First, starting with differential assessment. So this is when 2 or more conditions share similar presentation. And we have weathering and we have pathology. So with Black immigrant women and girls, we have weathering, the chronic allostatic load, the immigration precarity, racial surveillance, economic vulnerability, and the adapted hypervigilance. With pathology, that there's again that disorder-based classification, symptoms checklists that are being applied, the context is being stripped from the diagnosis, hypervigilance is being labeled as anxiety, and then the individual locus of dysfunction. And so the clinical question should shift from what is wrong to what is this protecting? We need to ask, when we see hypervigilance, we need to ask, okay, is this PTSD? Is this anxiety? Or is this simply them trying to survive in a country, in a system that is not built for them, that does not consider them? Now, when it comes to shifting the clinical lens, as clinicians, here is some things for us to consider. One is the question, is this survival or disorder? Okay, so evaluating the adaptive function before applying diagnostic criteria before jumping to a diagnosis. Also considering what are the real consequences of not being vigilant. So, for example, the question that I asked initially during the reflection exercise, what are the local attitudes around immigration, right? So when we think about, is this person being hypervigilant? Is this social anxiety? Are they suspicious of everyone? Is that the case? Or are there real world consequences of them not being careful, of them not being vigilant, of them not being mindful of other people? Okay. And the last one is, what would it cost this client to feel safe? So assessing environmental risk as part of the clinical picture. So these 3 questions help to reframe the assessment entirely, where we're not looking for what is broken or what's wrong, but we're looking for what someone has built and used to survive. The next one is the intergenerational intervention, the acculturation gap. So as clinicians, it's also important for us to be able to recognize that conflict is not often dysfunction, but simply difference. So with immigrant mothers, there is the value of survival and stability as primary values, collective family identity, mental health being a spiritual or moral issue, and then distrust of Western systems. For first gen daughters, there's identity and autonomy as a core value and need. There's individual US influence self-concept. There's mental health as a valid and necessary tool. And there is navigating two cultural worlds. So, for example, immigrant mothers, they are focused on survival, keeping their families together, making sure the basic needs are sorted of food, clothes, and shelter. The children are going to school, and they have all of those things sorted. For first-gen daughters, they're more so navigating, okay, my identity and learning to set boundaries and say no and finding themselves and discovering these two cultures between their home countries and their host countries. And so there can be difference, right? And so when we pathologize this conflict without understanding that there are cultural roots, there are cultural values, and there can be a difference between mother and daughter, then we end up alienating both the mother and the daughter, and we miss an actual clinical opportunity for intervention. So clinically, what we can do is honor the maternal wisdom. So we want to be able to bridge the maternal wisdom with the daughter's experience. So, asking and inviting mom to share her journey, what she left behind, what she carried, what she still carries. Acknowledging the grief that is embedded in migration, what was lost, what was left behind, whether they're able to name it or not. Considering what was protected. So again, going back to values, culture, sometimes this looks like food, music, certain holidays, and then the love behind the sacrifices that were made as well. And then what was hoped for. So connecting that hope to the daughter that's sitting in the room today. A lot of times, excuse me, with migration, there's a lot of hope, right? We're leaving this place in pursuit of better opportunities for school, better opportunities for work, better financial opportunities, and sometimes for hope of basic safety, right? And so being able to make those connections between what maternal wisdom is there and then daughter and her experiences, that is how we can bridge those gaps where both parties feel seen without forcing agreement and without pathologizing this as conflict. Okay. Now we have the cultural safety protocol, and we're going to look at the difference between cultural competence and cultural safety. Cultural competence is defined by the provider. That is what we know. It's knowledge-based. It is clinicians acquiring cultural knowledge, training certificates, workshops. It's defined by the provider. Cultural safety, that is relational and experiential. The client defines what feels safe to them. It's built in session, moment by moment, and again, defined by the client. Okay. You can know everything about a culture and still have a client who doesn't feel safe. Safety is not what you know, it's what the client experiences. When we see treatment resistance, we see clients that, excuse me, have a hard time engaging. We see clients that are a bit reserved. We should first ask, have we established cultural safety? One question that we can consider that can shift the entire therapeutic relationship from the very first session is asking our clients, what do I need to understand about your culture and experience for you to feel truly safe? This signals that the client's the expert on their experience. This positions culture as central to treatment, and it opens a relational door that standard intake questionnaires sometimes keep closed. So this question again can shift the therapeutic relation, helping to establish safety and maintain. So we have a clinical scenario here. A Haitian mother brings her 16-year-old daughter for therapy. Her daughter reports depression. The mother insists she just needs church. What are you thinking clinically? Notice any assumptions that you're making, any assumptions that are coming up. Your first intervention is A, psychoeducate the mother about clinical depression. B, explore what church represents to this family culturally. C, build alliance with the daughter separately from mother. Or D, assess for family conflict as the primary issue. And we can get some answers in the chat. Okay, someone said A, C, B. B. Okay. All right. A lot of B's here. So it is B. The the route that we want to take is exploring what church represents culturally. That is the entry point to everything else. So every answer has a different clinical lens. But when we are thinking about the pillars of belonging, cultural safety, and non-pathologizing, we want to explore what church represents. So, belonging, church may be the primary community institution. Disrupting it may disrupt the family's anchor. Cultural safety, meeting the mother in her framework builds trust before introducing clinical concepts. And then non-pathologizing, having curiosity about faith signals respect, not dismissal of the daughter's depression. Okay, so we want to explore. We want to open with what does this mean to you? What do I need to understand about your culture, about church, and what that represents in order for mother and daughter to feel safe, to feel that belonging, that cultural safety, the non-pathologizing. All right, and I want you to just take a moment now. Can be an individual reflection. This can be one where you share in the chat one thing that you would do differently in your next session working with a Black immigrant client. All right, if we want to effectively support Black immigrant women, we cannot just treat symptoms, we must understand structures that are shaping them. Belonging, again, is not an outcome of good therapy, it's a prerequisite for it. All right. Okay. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has at this time. Thank you. I see all the hearts. Thank you, guys. Okay.
Felicia, that was a really awesome presentation, and I really appreciated you taking the time to give it. Do you want to share any contact details, maybe in the Zoom chat for people who might want to reach out personally rather than ask it, in front of everyone?
Sure, absolutely. I'll put my contact information here in the chat. Um, Feel
And I think there
free
was
to,
a question in the chat as well just now.
how do you work with clients when there is a language barrier? Okay. So, um, there are a couple things. One is if there is a significant language barrier, then there is the option of using an interpreter. Um, there are HIPAA compliant interpretation services that you can use that can translate between English and Spanish. Sometimes for some clients that can feel like a barrier, right? And so it's important for you to also be able to recognize, is it appropriate for me to just simply refer this client to someone that speaks their native language that can provide what you can't? So there's option of interpretation services. There's also the option of making an appropriate referral. If the language barrier is not significant, then you can work together. It really depends though, right? If it feels like there are significant gaps, we want to always make sure that we can effectively communicate with our clients and also understand them as well. So if the language barrier is significant, then you have the option of interpretation services if that is something the client is open to, or if they would prefer, then there's also, again, just referring out. Sure. Okay. Any other questions? And I also just put my information in the chat. Okay. Oh, thank you, Jen. Saw your message. Yes, feel free. Um, I do post quite a bit, and I also on part of my practice website, I do have a blog where I do write about some of these different issues that are affecting our immigrant population. I do immigration evaluations as well, so being very connected with our immigrant community. So yes, feel free to, I'll add my Instagram there as well, but feel free to keep in touch through social media also. Regarding the scenario given when asking what does their church look like, but at any point, do you explain what it is, like depression and etc.? Yes. So yes, it will be, yes, it's been recorded. You will be able to rewatch. Now for the question regarding church, yes, we explore first with the client, what does church mean? And then we try to hold space again, just for bridging the gap between mother and daughter. We try to hold space for here's what church means, but also simultaneously we're seeing what's presenting if this is a daughter who isn't sleeping, a daughter who isn't eating. We also are seeing depression, right? Um, so being able to hold and explore both, right? I think sometimes when we are working with communities that do not have open conversations the way we do about mental health, sometimes they don't have the language to explain what's going on, right? So being able to again hold that church, that cultural element as it relates to church, and also putting language to, okay, these symptoms, this is depression, this is anhedonia, this is anxiety, right? Being able to give language to that. But again, being able to do that in a way that's non-pathologizing, right? Considering like, yes, this is depression, but it's not depression because you are not taking care of yourself. It's depression because you have a lot of reasons to be depressed. And also we recognize that church is a big pillar and a big part of like your community, your support system, a big pillar in your life, in your culture. Any other questions? Okay. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions that come in through email. Of course, thank you for joining. Thank you all for being here. Happy to answer any questions. Happy to connect as well to speak about this further. Um, More depth. So feel free to reach out and thank you all for being here.